Getting to the Super Bowl is a goal, but we're going to just take it a week at a time.
We don't make excuses, whether that's in London or whether that's out west. We're going to come, whether you roll the ball out on pavement or in the backyard. We're here and we're ready.
What's the chip on your shoulder this year?
Just trying to get me a chip. Trying to get me a chip,
The pressure is on, so pressure either burst pipes or make diamonds, and we in the diamond making business.
What are they getting?
Everything out of me. They're going to get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that.
Ever since day one, Lamar Jackson has told us that it's his goal to win a Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens. It's seemingly all he cares about, and he brings it up any chance he gets. I don't know about you guys, but that's everything you'd want to hear coming out of a franchise quarterback. They currently feel like the strongest team in the AFC, tied at the top of the standings, and it feels wide open, especially with the Chiefs looking a little bit weaker than usual. So that leads me to ask the question, could this be the first Super Bowl of the Lamar Jackson era in Baltimore? There are two huge differences between this roster and the rosters of years past, one being the defense and the other being the wide receiver room, and there's also a potentially massive X factor sitting somewhere on this roster that we'll get into later. And of course, just like any other team, there are obstacles between them and the Lombardi that we'll also get into, but I think first and foremost, flowers are due for this incredible Ravens defense. It seems like they're on pace to be known as a potentially all-time great unit. It's by far the best they've had in the Lamar Jackson era. The heart and soul of it are guys like Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, and Justin Madubuike, but their true greatness is in the unit. They play like a hungry pack of wolves who are all able to be on one string. They play as if they fully trust each other, and I think that that's what makes them one of the most special units in the NFL. And it begins with the best linebacker duo in the NFL, Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith. In my opinion, Roquan Smith is the best middle linebacker in the league outside of maybe Fred Warner, and I can't believe that the Bears actually got rid of him. However, I feel like he can be properly appreciated being in Baltimore. When you think of the Baltimore Ravens, you think about guys like Ray Lewis. Obviously, I'm not saying that he's at Ray's level, but when they brought him in, it really brought back that identity to that franchise and that defense. He's very much so an old school sideline to sideline badass linebacker. I love everything about his game and his attitude. This dude eats, sleeps, and breathes football, and he will more than likely end up leading the league in tackles this year. And then with Patrick Queen, I actually think that acquiring Roquan Smith really helped take a lot of the pressure off his shoulders, because as many of you know, the Ravens run a 3-4 defense, and if you don't know what that means just means two middle linebackers. So before Roquan was there was a lot of pressure on Queen having to be the one to make a majority of the plays. But now that Roquan is there, it allows him to play a little bit more freely now that not as much is being asked of him. And I think that together, it's pretty obvious. They're the best linebacker duo in the league. They're the only linebacker duo that has 100 tackles apiece. And to me, I look at them a lot like Batman and Robin. Now we get to talk about my favorite player on this entire defense, Kyle Hamilton. I remember when he slipped in the draft due to a slow 40 time, and now I feel like every defensive coordinator in the league would love to have him on their team. He's one of the most versatile DBs in the NFL. They use him a lot in the slot, as a safety, and in some ways as an additional linebacker almost. When I watch him, I see everything you would want in a modern day safety. He's so physically imposing, his strength really pops out on film, he's a fearless, surefire tackler, he consistently uses his length to his advantage, and he looks pretty good in pass coverage as well. There's very, very little holes in his game. And if they have to run into the Chiefs come playoff time, best believe Kyle Hamilton will be absolutely vital, especially when it comes to guarding Travis Kelce. Now, we've never seen them lined up against each other, but I can promise you one thing: Hamilton will 100% be able to hold his own. Those two are made to go against each other, so I'm really hoping we get to see that matchup come playoff time. Now, I mean what I'm about to say with absolutely all due respect, but it's actually incredible how good this Ravens defense is without having elite pass rushers off the edge. To get the level of production they've gotten from Jadeveon Clowney, who is making next to nothing on a one-year deal, and Kyle Van Noy, who they picked up mid-season, is incredible, but it's also a true testament to these guys' character. Those two embody what it means to be a professional, and they've been going crazy. But I also want to give some flowers to Odafe Owe because he's a key contributor as well. But if we're talking about guys who rush the passer, we have to talk about Justin Madubuike because that dude is a dog. He's the first player since 2017, Terrell Suggs, to have double-digit sacks in a Ravens uniform. Adam Schefter recently reported that the Ravens tried really hard to sign him to an extension this past offseason, but he refused, bet on himself, and I think it's paid off immensely. He's either going to get paid this offseason or franchise tagged, and I think that that's because the Ravens defense can't afford to lose a guy like this. He's another guy, like I said earlier, who's the heart and soul of this defense. And I haven't even mentioned guys like Marlon Humphrey, who's still one of the elite corners in this league. He's just been dealing with some injuries. Hopefully he can stay healthy because this team absolutely needs him come postseason. Or someone like Geno Stone, who's second in the league in interceptions. You got Brandon Stevens, Marcus Williams, Arthur Millette. The list goes on. This defense is full of absolute dogs. It's no wonder they're on pace to be known as a potentially all-time great unit, and best believe they're going to need every single one of them if they want to win the Super Bowl. Now we got to move on to the offensive side of the ball, specifically where they've improved most. Like I said at the beginning of the video, the wide receiver room. You got guys like Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham, Rashad Bateman. Now it might not seem like much, but trust me, it cannot be overstated how important these guys are, especially come playoff time. Just ask any Ravens fan how they've been feeling the past few years about the wide receivers that the Ravens have put next to Lamar Jackson. Anytime that ball was up in the air, you had fans crossing their fingers that they wouldn't drop a pass. And I think that it begins with their first round pick out of Boston College, Zay Flowers. This dude is lightning in a bottle. Him and Tank Dell are definitely the best wide receivers of this rookie class. And with Mark Andrews out, it seems like Zay is now their go-to guy, deservedly so. He has so much of Steve Smith in his game anytime I watch him. I love how physical he plays despite his build. He's lightning quick, and he already has such a polished game for a rookie. And with the season coming to an end, I think it's super important that him and Lamar continue to build their chemistry, because he's going to be the most important piece of that offense come playoff time. And then you have someone like Odell Beckham. Obviously he's not prime OBJ, but he's been good when needed and is definitely an upgrade from what they've had in previous years. If he can stay healthy come playoffs, I think he'll be even more valuable for them when the time comes, because in previous years they just simply haven't had enough on the outside to contend for a championship. And then there's Rashad Bateman, who I absolutely refuse to give up on. I'm sure a lot of Ravens fans are beginning to lose hope, and I guess I can understand why, but I'm not entirely sure why he's not getting more targets. I know he pretty consistently deals with injuries, but I still believe he can be a potentially valuable piece to that offense, especially with Mark Andrews being out. The targets are going to be there, and I think that one of the guys outside of OBJ and Zay are going to need to step up. So I'd look for someone like Nelson Aguilar, Isaiah Likely, or like I said, Rashad Bateman to be a potential X factor for them come playoffs. All right, we talked about all the good stuff surrounding Lamar Jackson and the Ravens and why I personally feel they're primed for a Super Bowl run. But just like with any other team in the league, there are potential roadblocks/obstacles standing in between them and the Lombardi. These are the three biggest concerns surrounding the Baltimore Ravens. Number one, injuries. If you look at their injury report on a week-to-week basis, it's almost consistently full. Obviously, every team in the league is dealing with them, but it feels like the Ravens deal with it a lot more than others. And they lost Mark Andrews, who is an absolutely massive piece to that offense. Without him, someone's going to have to pick up the slack. They've done pretty good so far, but they're going to need way more, especially when the playoffs roll around. I'm just not sure they can afford to lose another key piece, especially on that offense. Here's to hoping they're able to bring in someone like Zach Ertz, because even signing someone like him would help boost that offense, even if it's just a little bit. Number two, Patrick Mahomes. Yes, the Ravens look like the strongest team coming out of the AFC right now. Yes, the Chiefs look weaker than usual, but as long as number 15's on that team, you're more than likely going to have to get through him. It's the same feeling that I used to get with Brady or Manning. Mahomes is a different animal in January when the playoffs come around. I do, however, believe that the Ravens have the defense to beat him, but it obviously will not be easy. Now on to the third, and to me, the most important concern surrounding the Baltimore Ravens, themselves. They've lost 3 times this year to the Colts, Browns, and Steelers. Now, yes, I understand that every team loses, but it's the way they lose games. They lose games you'd expect them to win. I think a reason for that is because their offense sputters at very annoying times. They hired Todd Monken hoping that they could avoid these types of issues, but the play calling has a tendency to get repetitive at the weirdest times, which is very disappointing. Although it's not a consistent issue, you can't just have issues like this come up, especially come playoff time, because if you sputter for a half, that will more than likely cost you the season. season. But from my viewpoint, I feel like the offense looks better under Monken than it did under Greg Roman, and I think that Lamar Jackson would agree, as he's on pace to have a career high in passing yards in a season. Again, the issue isn't consistent, but it can ultimately cost you in the biggest games of the year. Like I said, all teams have flaws. Every single team has flaws. I don't think that any of the roadblocks I mentioned are debilitating. There's solutions to each and every one of them. This team is primed for a Super Bowl run. Like I've said a million times this video, I feel like they've surrounded Lamar with a bunch of the necessary pieces, from the defense to the wide receivers to the new offensive coordinator. I think the organization has done a great job of putting the right pieces in place to make this a Super Bowl winning team. Sure, it's not perfect, but there has been a conscious effort from the front office to push for improvement. The AFC feels wide open this year, more than in any of the past years I've watched the Ravens in the Lamar era. The defense feels like the strongest since the famous 2000 team, and I do feel like he has enough weapons around him to make it work if they can stay healthy. If there was ever a time to win your first one, at 26 years old, this feels like the perfect time to do it. Ever since I was in high school watching Lamar at Louisville, I've been one of his biggest supporters, and it just sucks how often I feel like his teams fall short of the ultimate success. But this year just feels different, I'm not gonna lie. So here's to hoping that this is the year that we get to see Lombardi Lamar.